Hello and welcome to the Money Marketing Podcast. I'm Kimberly Dondo, Digital Content Manager. And once again, I have the entire editorial team with me at the end of this month of January to kind of go over what have been their highlights, as well as possibly give us a bit of a preview for the February issue. So let's start off with you, Katie. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I can. I'm Katie Pigden, the editor of Money Marketing, and very proud of all the good stories that have come out this month.
I'm Michael Climbs, and I'm the news editor of Money Marketing, and I echo Katie's comment about being very proud about the content very strongly.
Hi, I'm Lois Vallely. I'm chief reporter, and I've really enjoyed reporting on all the stories I have this month. So I look forward to letting you know what they were.
Hi, I'm Amanda Newman-Smith, feature writer. I'm very interested to speak to all the advisors again. It's always a pleasure. So I've got some bits to talk about later on about that.
Hi, I'm John Sandria, one of the reporters.
Hello, hi, my name is Mohamed Musatoué. I'm a reporter too.
Okay, great to have you guys back again. So on my part, I tend to look at and focus on all the digital aspects, especially with the podcast. So I know that you guys are going to kind of cover all the stories that have done really well online as well in the mag. But I just wanted to point out what we have achieved with our podcast so far this month. So our number one podcast is by Amanda, actually. Do we expect more for less? From advisors. That seems to have been a very popular one and probably resonated very well with the audience. Next was Mike's Why We Need More Frank Fields. And then we had our podcast that is part of a new series that we have in association with Royal London. The first episode actually dropped this week, which means that it's doing very well. And that was protecting customers' health to build their financial resilience. And then we had another great piece from Amanda, which was fitting in the other side of social mobility, another one that probably resonated with the audience. And then the last one was by JB, the advisor's Christmas wish list. I think some people still are hoping for those Christmas wishes to come true, probably. But also, rather excitingly, we've also just hit 30,000 downloads, which is amazing, just from the regular uploads and stuff. So thank you for everyone listening. And we hope to continue creating really fun content for you to listen to on with the podcast. So what were your highlights, guys? What can you tell me a bit about what you've written that was really stood out for you, or anything that you came across that also stood out for you? Let's start.
I'll just highlight that we've had some really, really strong stories this month. January can be a bit of a slow month sometimes. I think that's becoming a bit of a myth, a bit like the sort of summer lull as well. It never seems to actually materialize. So the team have really had some big, juicy stories. And actually, some of them came in late at the end of the month, which usually is quite hard to then even make it anywhere into those rankings, and they are right up there. So I might pick on Momadou first with a story about Mercer. Do you want to tell the audience a bit more about that, Momadou?
Yes, for sure. That was a big story to explore. Yeah, I managed to speak to some pensioners that had the issue with the way Marshall was handling pension DB schemes. And then I spoke to some, advisors, So, I think that story just highlights, the issue with the pension sector in terms of the way they handle, DB schemes. And it's still a very old industry, they have to get up to date with their communication, the way they handle pensioners in this particular day and age. So that was fun. Writing the story.
Yeah, it seemed to get a lot of comments on the site and on the social channels as well. And actually, we got the idea for the story from some of the comments that people were leaving on our site about something else. I think it actually stemmed from an appointment story, something as simple as that. And we realized there was something worth chasing there. So well done, Mamadou.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Yeah, I think that's very true. Yeah, I mean, this was kind of like two random comments. On a different story. We had a story about, a change of management. At Massa, and then two advisors made some comments saying how awful Massa was, and then we tried to build on that, and then we spoke to so many people. Who had terrible experience with Massa, and they told us how awful Massa was in terms of dealing with the pension savings.
Did you manage to get much from the company itself, Mamadou? Did they tell you what the reasons might be behind some of this?
No, that was a very terrible experience. Yeah, getting access to Massa. I think what the people were saying. I also had the same experience. I went to the website. There was no contact telephone number. There was no email. So it was, nightmare even accessing. The Massa team. It's like who to speak to. They seem to have like so many offices. And there's no one coordinating office. They can't like speak to the media or people, So my experience was terrible, awful.
Yeah. And from what I can gather, it seems like they're not the only company as well that might be this bad at sort of dealing with things. It seems like actually since then, we've had a few advisors sort of say, yeah, unfortunately, we wish this was just an isolated incident, but it's not.
Indeed, yeah. This kind of like the whole sector, and that's what somebody told me, a financial advisor, who has been in the pension sector for the past 40 years. He was saying that even he, being part of this, the sector, with this experience, he's having a tough time, he's having his own pension retire in January, and he's still having issue, to access, his own pension. So I think this is a sector-wide, issue that has to be handled by the sector.
Yeah. So that was one of the stories that just came in quite late in the month and actually really, really shot up. It made it into our magazine in terms of the most read in that as well. So worth looking out for. Lois, you had a very, very interesting story and probably slightly disappointed that yours was doing so well. It was right up there, and then Mamadou snuck in and overtook with it, but obviously still a very, very strong story. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your one?
Yes, sure. So the one that I was working on, actually it went up before Mamadou's, and then his story picked mine to the post in terms of most page views. But it was about the network Tenet and the fact that advisors continue to leave this network in their droves. So it's a story that's been going on for a while. I think since Tenet switched over to Intelligent, or now called IntelliFlow Office, in September 2019, it seems to have come up against quite a lot of issues, and quite a few appointed representatives have left the network. So these ones who have left, I spoke to some. Also, we get quite a few comments on our website, and there's been quite a few comments on online forums, which I won't say the names of, just about how terribly apparently Tenet has been integrating this new IO system. On the other hand, Tenet argues that it's just prioritizing productive advisors, and that has actually sort of pushed some, or had to let some go because they don't meet new standards of regulation, or they no longer suit Tenet's own proposition. So it's difficult to sort of, not being on the inside, obviously, to determine to what extent these ARs have left because they've been unhappy with the service from Tenet, and to what extent Tenet's actually let them go because they haven't been productive. So it's quite an interesting sort of tussle. I know in terms of needing ARs to become to be more productive, Quilter has been going through a similar sort of productivity drive, I think it called it, and says it does expect to experience a further drop in the number of appointed representatives at its network, Quilter Financial Planning, as it nears the completion of its productivity drive this year. So that's one aspect that both Tenet and Quilter have sort of experienced. But yeah, in terms of the Tenet one, it seems to get a lot more complaints from ARs. So it's an interesting argument.
Excellent. One to watch, I think, with Tenet, it sounds like it is a combination of the two, maybe. Very much that people are leaving because they're not happy, but also the company might be deciding that actually it's not quite right for us to work together anymore as well. Worth seeing how they play out and what happens there. Interestingly, with Quilter, though, I think we also have another story about them looking to grow advisors in a different area of the business.
So this is apparently, so they've got Quilter Financial Planning, but this Quilter Private Client Advisors, which services sort of really high net worth clients, actually sits within Quilter Cheviot, which is its more of its investment business. I just noticed a job advert recently on their website saying they're recruiting financial planners for Quilter Private Client Advisors, which is, as I said, the high net worth one, across the UK. So right from Belfast down to Exeter, I think. And so they're looking to grow that part. They've and they've told me that fairly recently they've recruited a managing director, and she's really pushing for this. That'll be an interesting one to watch to see how that grows.
Perfect. JB, any standout stories for you?
I don't know how it performed in terms of stats, but I found really interesting what happened around London Capital and Finance. So the recent wave of email scams, what appears to be email scams. So I would have expected this case to be closed, but apparently it's not over yet.
No, it's still going. And actually, there were probably a few sort of harsh comments on that in terms of, well, they fell for it once, why not try and fall for it again? But obviously something that the regulators are taking seriously, and the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, trying to make sure people are aware of this. I guess it's those people are vulnerable at the moment, and that there's all the stories that I think you've covered loads of them yourself, JB, that the compensation scheme that's being handed out from the government as well. It's really unusual for some of these things to have stepped in to sort of deal with that. So we would have thought that maybe some of these claims management companies might be coming in and saying, yes, we can help you get your money or whatever, when actually they're better off just in the standard process. But really interesting one. Do you reckon it will come to a conclusion anytime soon, JB? What are we thinking of how it might come to an end? It's been dragging on for quite some time now.
Well, in terms of the regulator, I think everything is in place. But whether there would be further incidents, that's not been predict.
No, exactly. Mike, our news editor, obviously generally editing lots of the copy that comes in. Occasionally, me and you get to write a story. It's nice when we do. What stories have stood out for you this month?
Unfortunately, Katie, there's been some sad news. Tributes have poured in from the profession to 3 people who sadly died. One was Mary Harper, who was managing director of Aviva Financial Advice, and also the UK life director. Unfortunately, she passed away. We also heard very sad news that the advice veteran Andrew Denham Davis died. Waverton Investment Management, which was a firm that he joined quite recently, actually, November 2020, put out a very glowing tribute to him. And also, sadly, we heard that Stonebridge founder Richard Adams passed away on Boxing Day following a long battle with cancer. So tributes also poured in for him as well. Aside from that very sad news, one story which really captured our attention this month was a story that Momody did on pension. Another one, yeah. Another one, it was related to coronavirus. It's actually quite an interesting one from a pensions angle, because the government introduced emergency legislation to try and get loads of retired NHS doctors and nurses back to fight the pandemic when it started, really kicking off a couple of years ago in March 2020. And what they did was they said that doctors or nurses who did come back wouldn't be suffer any penalty on their pensions, but that exclusion is basically set to expire this March. That emergency temporary legislation to incentivise to bring them back, and so there are warnings that up to or over 7,000 NHS staff, both doctors and nurses, might leave the NHS to avoid this financial penalty when the Emergency Coronavirus Act expires in March this year. So I thought that was really interesting, and just shows you how complex pensions are. And when the government ever introduces anything temporary, it can have all these knock-on effects, which no one really thinks about. And that's a theme which has continued with COVID, unfortunately. So that's one thing which hasn't changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, the whole team have produced some fantastic content. Kim highlighted at the beginning that it's not just always in the written form. It's sometimes that spoken version, that the podcast and some of the pieces that Amanda's done. Like I say, it's probably a bit rarer nowadays for me to write big stories, but I try occasionally. And I don't know if I'll be able to rival Momadou's and Lois's performance this month, but hot off the press, like as we're recording this now, is just coming out the news that SJP is going through a bit of a rebrand. So it's St James's Place Wealth Management. We all know it. We refer to it as SJP quite commonly, but actually they're going to be dropping the wealth management part of the name going forward. It's going to take about 2 years probably for them to completely transition to their new look. They've obviously still kept the name SJP, so getting that sort of history that they're well known for as well. But obviously, actually, as their managing director highlighted to me, they're not as old as people might think. They're only 30 years old. But it's the first time that the company's sort of gone through this. They want to call it a refresh, I guess, rather than a sort of rebrand as such. But yes, that story is going out as we speak now. Obviously, we might produce our podcast. It might come out a little bit later for that, but hopefully it's only got a few days in terms of the end of the month. Maybe I can sort of try and push into those rankings, but I doubt it. SJP is usually a name that attracts a lot of attention on our site for good or bad. So yes, it's nice to be able to hand in a new story myself as well. But also, as well as these ones that we produce for online, we've obviously got our fantastic magazine. So if you haven't signed up to that already, make sure you do. It's in a monthly format now, so it's crazy. We're often thinking a month ahead of where we actually are. So the January issue is there. We've had some great content in that. Momadou, again, up he comes again with the Mind the Advice Gap. Great cover feature there. I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about that, Momadou.
Yeah, thank you very much, Katie. Yeah, that was a very good cover feature, because I think the financial advice gap, that's a big issue. Because we all know, the importance of financial advice. When I come to the sector, that's one of the issue that kind of like, that's the connection I had with the sector, because I know that can change lives. So as part of my research, I found that there are up to like 6 million people who are in the affordable advice gap. They want advice, but they cannot afford it. So I think the whole issue is to raise the point that financial advice does matter, and there's a whole chunk of the British population that kind of like are left behind and don't have access to financial advice. So I think that was the purpose of this cover, to kind of like raise that issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly, again, another one that sparked a bit of debate on our site. Some advisors say advice gap. There's no such thing as an advice gap. What are you talking about? But as we've argued, there's so many people that maybe don't even know financial advice exists or how they go about getting that. So I think it's really important that we do raise those things. Obviously, we're not going to please everyone all of the time. We know that, but that's why we do it sometimes, that we need to challenge common perceptions. From one gap to another, though, the gender pensions gap. Amanda, you wrote a great piece about there could be a potential solution to solve that. Could you tell us a little bit more?
Of course, Katie. Yeah, we all know that women are not saving enough for their pensions. You know, there's the gender pay gap, as you mentioned, but also some women have children and take time out for that reason. So now Pensions and the Diversity Project, we're looking at whether shared parental leave could help in this way. Shared parental leave has been introduced for a few years now. It was introduced in 2015. But take-up's been quite low. I think research puts it at about 2%. The idea behind it is that, you know, the maternity leave that women have enjoyed for a long time can be split between men and women. You know, we're all used to men going off for probably their little sort of 2-week paternity leave, and that's kind of it, while women can take up to a year. But the idea behind this is that, you know, it can be split so the women return to work earlier than they would have done, and therefore contribute to their pensions. But I have to say, I had my youngest child in 2015. It was relevant to me at the time, and we looked at it and considered it, and it didn't work for us. So the reason behind that is if you've got one person earning more than another, your household income will go down if you split parental leave. That was true in our case. We just found that, you know, once your statutory paternity pay or maternity pay, whatever it happens to be, goes down to £150 a week or thereabouts, then that has implications for your household, and we found we couldn't pay our bills on that, to be quite bluntly. So I was looking at whether this is actually a realistic option. I think it seems to be great where women are the breadwinners, and you know there are households where that is the case. We've got friends who are in that situation, but I think for most women, because we do have children, we physically give birth, and we've got to take a bit of time out to look after ourselves, and maybe we want to spend time with our children, then you know that still has implications for us. It's not as easy as just splitting leave with our other halves and going off nicely to stick a bit in our pension. So I've been looking at that, and I found it's not as simple, unfortunately, as just splitting leave. There are other implications there, and not least the gender gap itself. So that was what I found.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting to see, like, you know, like you said, the take up so low, but how many people are actually aware that this is even a possibility? You said, you know, you researched it and it wasn't quite for you, but are employers making that clear to people that that is an option? You know, maybe they should discuss that with their partner, but also it probably highlights that a lot of companies could have better policies in place where people aren't having to just rely on the statutory pay or anything like that. So it highlights some wider issues in society as well there, I think, Amanda. So thank you. Anything else from the January magazine that anyone would like to highlight? Lois?
Yes, it's actually quite relevant to what we were just talking about there, because I wrote my leader column about basically how sort of white male dominated the financial advice profession is, or from what I've seen anyway, from my 7 or 8 months here. Just from sort of talking to people and from attending our events. So this leader I wrote off the back of a panel discussion I chaired at MMI London, I think it was, about ESG, and just we tweeted a photo, and the panel was just me and then 4 white middle-aged men who all gave very valuable contributions to the event, of course, but it was just interesting. We got some sort of backlash on Twitter, I think probably quite rightly, for our lack of diversity on the panel. And it's definitely not just a male-female issue. It's like just lack of diversity generally, I think, within the sector. My argument in the leader is basically that I think we need a sort of, to an extent, we need positive discrimination to sort of tip the balance the other way. It's had some positive and some negative reception, but I think it's a very interesting debate. And I by no means have the sort of answer to this issue, which is an issue that isn't just a surprise just because I've highlighted it in this issue of the magazine. I think it's been sort of there for a long time. But it is definitely something that money marketing can help with, and we are very aware of it and are trying. Obviously, we don't get it right all the time, but yeah, I think it's just something that needs to be talked about more, and I can't solve it myself, but I just wanted to highlight it as an issue in the magazine. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up.
No, definitely, and you're right. It is something, again, that money marketing is aware of. I'm sure lots of other companies are aware of it. People are sort of getting people in place to look at that specifically in their business, that there are sort of diversity leads or champions or whatever that might be. We're actually signed up to the 50/50 initiative with the BBC. So we are trying to look a little bit more closely at our content and coverage that we put out, with the thing in mind that we still do want the best speakers and the most people with like the most knowledge, but it's an opportunity for hopefully companies to put other spokespeople forward, and hopefully they will sort of sign up to that. So I think our listeners might be able to see a little video with you soon, Lois, giving a bit more information about the 50/50 project and what money marketing's doing. But certainly it's something that we're thinking of across our events, our content, and everything really. And like I say, lots of companies in the profession are as well. And again, unfortunately, sometimes we get people sort of arguing, well, it's not a problem. But I think it's quite easy to say if you've never encountered or experienced something yourself, and it's then hard to talk for other people that have. Anything else from the mag? One thing that stood out to me, so I'm going to pick on our news editor again here, was we've got our Meets series, really great series of interviews with senior people, predominantly CEOs, but also sometimes politicians. Talking of which, Mel Stride was on Newsnight last night, and JB got an interview with him at the end of last year, which was great. But for the January mag, that was over to you, Mike, for the Meets, wasn't it?
Yeah, I managed to meet the CEO of FE Fund Info, Hamish Purdy, who's Australian. And I was told before I met him that he absolutely loves cricket. And it's the polar opposite of me, because I absolutely hate cricket. I'm a huge boxing fan, as probably everyone knows. But it was really, really good to talk to him about cricket, because it was just it was sort of the door into sort of his whole kind of character and history, and it was a spine for the article. So he came over here initially in 2000 to watch the Ashes with a friend, and then he ended up working here. And during the interview, England was playing New Zealand at the very time in the cricket match, so he was checking the scores during the interview. And I asked him, just as he was leaving, who does he want to win, England or New Zealand? And he didn't answer the question. He just laughed and left, which was a sort of a fitting end to the interview. But it was just about he talked about leadership, becoming a CEO during the start of the pandemic, those challenges, and that sport and cricket is a lot like life, and gives you life lessons, teaches you about winning and losing, leading, organizing people, inspiring people. So that's kind of, so I thank cricket for once, and I enjoyed cricket for the first time in my life, and really enjoyed writing up this interview. It was really good fun, and really enjoyed it.
Excellent. And JB, you touched on it earlier in terms of the London Capital and Finance situation, but you had a really good leader as well in terms of the FCA and whistleblowing, and there being a slight problem there.
Yeah, so obviously it was an opinion piece, so it's my own interpretation of the rules, of the FCA's rules on whistleblowers. And the FCA didn't agree with my interpretation. And what else should I say?
Well, I think the fact that they're reading it and taking notice shows that there is obviously some problem. I don't think you're the first or the last person to sort of frame it in that argument that maybe they need a slightly better policy as to how they handle whistleblowing complaints and suggestions and stuff from people. But it does show that obviously the impact that those mini bond provider collapses have had on people, and obviously I think it's caught a bit more attention now. Amanda, obviously, as our dedicated features writer, was there any other features or anything that stood out to you, or maybe a sneak preview of what we can expect in the February Mag?
Well, Katie, as a feature writer, I do love a good human interest story. And, sneak preview of February issue, I am speaking to loads of people about their real life stories, which I'm absolutely loving. I've been speaking to advisors about the pitfalls of leaving a network. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to tell advisors now, please, whenever you join a network, do look at the implications of what would happen if you were to want to leave at some point. I know it's not something you want to look at the start, but it's a bit like, having a divorce. You should really look at the implications to make sure that you can get out of things just as much as you can get into them quite easily. Because without giving too much away for February, I've been speaking to people who have had some horrendous things happen to them as a result of trying to leave when it's time to, move on, get directly authorised or whatever they happen to want to do. So, just be careful what you're signing up to.
Absolutely. And if any advisors listening, obviously do take heed of Amanda's advice. But equally, once you've had a chance to read the February content and that network piece, do let us know what your experience has been. Maybe get in contact. We're always happy to sort of do follow-ups and see where we can advance the story from there. So always good to sort of hear new voices as well as to what their experience has been. So thanks for highlighting that, Amanda. And any others?
I'm working on another one where people are telling me the amazing stories they've got about entering the advice profession. It never ceases to amaze me how many different people are in this profession, the different routes they've taken. And I've spoken to some amazing people, some struggling with disabilities, some realising that, for their lifestyle reasons that they've got to change career. They might be in their 50s, might having to start from scratch again. And I just take my hat off to everyone I've spoken to. You're all amazing.
Oh, lovely. That forms part of our In Focus series that runs in the mag, where actually we address a few themes. We touched on one earlier, diversity. We do look at that as well, and equality and inclusion. We also look at vulnerable clients as well, and ESG. And what we tend to do is we cycle around those themes. So if anyone's ever got ideas for those, that's always welcome. And also we've got a lovely section called Financial Advisor to Be, where often Amanda, but sometimes other members of the team are talking to people about entering the advice profession. So obviously, if there are any new and aspiring advisors out there, we encourage you to take a look as well. As a hub online with lots of resource information there, but a nice section of the magazine, and we're trying to make it a bigger focus of events too. So whether that's young people just starting out or second careerists or maybe even third, I don't know. But it's really nice to sort of see those stories and how people are entering the advice profession. So very, very good. A couple of other bits we can look out for in February. As I know, I said I don't usually have a huge amount of time to write some stuff, but I stole the cover feature this month, and I had a little look at the alphabet soup situation of platform technology provider FNZ trying to acquire GBST. The CMA, the Competitions Markets Authority, got involved, and it's been going on for over 2 years, I think, from sort of start to finish, or maybe even 2.5 potentially, of them trying to acquire, thinking that they had, getting approval in Australia, and then having problems here in the UK. So you can find out lots more about that in the cover feature. And I think, Lois, you are responsible for our Meet for the February issue. And can you tell us who that's with?
Yes, I spoke to Andy Bell, CEO of AJ Bell. We had a great conversation. He was very nice and friendly, down-to-earth CEO, and didn't mind at all that I knew very little about platforms, didn't mind sort of giving me the layman's explanation of that. So that was great to chat to him.
Brilliant. Excellent. Any other highlights from people or little snippets of what we can expect? Mike?
A leader on why providers need to raise their game and improve their customer service.
Excellent. Okay. Looking forward to that as well then. Kim, do you want to finish us off with anything in terms of standout ones to you, or what some of the stats have shown, maybe stories that people haven't mentioned?
I think everyone has mentioned the stories that did really well because they also kind of stood out to them. but I think we have grown a lot. It can normally be quite a slow month, but there's been so much happening that we have just hit the ground running and had so much engagement on the website as well as on our different social media. So it's just been kind of really exciting just to continue to grow and see where we can go.
Excellent. Talking of that, there's a couple of new sort of features and things that we're introducing as well. So on Mondays, people can look out for a behind the headlines, where we sort of look at a news article or something that's gone in on that particular week, or maybe sort of wider, and we try and see what that's really meaning for the advice sector or what's sort of happening there. We're also going to be introducing something called Target Market, which is where we have a little look at niche advice, we'll say. So, for example, advisors looking at a specific group of clients, maybe doctors or veterans, or I don't know, police, teachers, you name it. We're going to start looking at that as well. So some exciting new content coming up for people to look out for as well. And of course, the podcast, you touched on it earlier, Kim, we've got a current one, a protection and wellbeing podcast with Royal London. It's actually also with our sister publication, Mortgage Strategy, which is lovely. And that's a 5-part series where we're going into those things in a little bit more detail. So there's plenty to listen out for there as well, and also our usual weekend essays and things like that too. So lots and lots people to look at and listen to.
Yeah, definitely. Way more to come. So just keep subscribed to us, keep following us, keep getting in touch with us through all the social media. Just keep up the engagement, and we love to see it.
Thanks very much.
Okay. So yeah, again, thank you everybody for coming together for this podcast. I do hope that everyone enjoyed listening to it and getting to know the team a lot more. I enjoy listening to you guys and hearing your personal stories of how you came about the stories that you've written and what the fallout has been for those. It's really interesting for me to hear. I just get to kind of post them and put them up and see what happens online, but it's really good to hear like the background of everything. So if you would like to hear more from the team, please do keep up to date with all our new releases via Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you get your podcast from. You can also keep up to date with all our written content published on the Money Marketing website, as well as the monthly magazine. Look out for that February issue, as well as check us out on our Twitter and LinkedIn. So for the whole team, see you next month, right?
See you then.
See you next month. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.